Hey everybody, it's Josh from the Texas chapter of the Extra Pint Crokinole Club. Today I want your opinion on an idea I've got on how to run a fair and balanced singles league. A while ago, there was a discussion on Facebook. Somebody asked, I think it was the Charleston Club or maybe the Brooklyn Club, do you guys play singles or do you play doubles? And the response was, well, we do doubles because if we play singles, it rapidly becomes apparent who's better, and that person wins almost the entire time. This, of course, is true, which is why our club up in Voorheesville only plays doubles. It just makes it fair to match up a lesser skilled person with a more experienced player. But I got to thinking there has to be a way to incorporate people into a singles league where they're going to feel like they're going to have a chance and they're not going to be dominated the whole time. You can just imagine how intimidated someone would be. Hey, we have this Crokinole league, come play. My name's Connor Ryman or my name's Andrew Hutchinson, and I want you to play with me in our Crokinole club. And you've just started the game and you basically have absolutely no chance at all. And to be fair, I wouldn't have a chance either, at least not in a league setting where you'll be playing these people over and over again. So the trick is coming up with a handicapping system that's fair to everybody, along the lines of what they have in bowling or in golf. And I think I figured out how to do it, and this is where I want everyone's opinion. Where am I going wrong? What am I missing? See, back in November, we had a singles tournament down here at Extra Pint, Texas, and I got a chance to test this theory out on 3 different round-robin pools. What I did, I took each pool and did a statistical analysis on the results. What I was looking for is where people were earning their points relative to their position in the pool. The first step in doing this was to find the standard deviation of each pool. Each pool would have an average score. The standard deviation is measuring, on average, how far away from the mean everyone's score was. If a pool has a low standard distribution, everyone's scores were close together and it was a competitive pool. A higher standard distribution would indicate a wider gap between skill levels within the player base. Once I had this number, I was able to create a table and analyze each individual scorecard and determine what percentage of points they won or lost against each opponent with respect to the difference between their final scores relative to the pool's standard deviation. To explain that in English, for example, I looked at Robert's score sheet and determined the percentage of points he won against opponents within a half standard deviation of himself. This pool standard deviation was 8.76. I rounded it to 9, so in this case that's 5 points above or below his score of 29. Kyle was his only opponent that met this criteria at 26 points. They played 4 rounds during their match with the potential to win 8 points total. Robert managed to win 6 of the 8 points. When Robert played opponents who scored between a half and 1 standard deviation below him, that's between 5 and 9 points below him in this case, we find Jeff, whom Robert managed 5 of 8 points. Against opponents that scored between 1 and 1.5 standard deviations below him, he managed to take 12 out of 16 possible points. He had one opponent who finished between 1.5 and 2 standard deviations below him, from which he took 6 of 8 points. He had one opponent who finished between 1 and 1.5 standard deviations above him. That was Mark Molasses, to whom he lost 0 to 8. In fact, Robert was the only player that Mark managed to sweep during the entire round robin, to his internal shame. I did this for each player within each pool, determining how many points they won compared to how many they played for per opponents within every half standard deviation up to 2 standard deviation. And by points played for, I mean if a pair only got 3 games in, they'd only be playing for 6 points. They wouldn't be scored for a game they didn't play. I added up every column and came up with the following results. Across all pools, players who played opponents that finished more than 2 standard deviations below themselves won 100 out of 112 possible points, or 89.2% of the points. If they played someone who finished between 2 and 1 standard deviations below them, they won 97 out of 130 points, or 74.6% of the points. Against players within 1 standard deviation of themselves, as a field, it was 228 for 460, or they won 49.5% of the points. Against players that finished between 1 and 2 standard deviations above them, the field was 31 for 132, or 23.4%. Against folks that finished 2 standard deviations or more above them, they were 12 for 102, or they only won 11.7% of the points. Now, where the numbers don't quite add up, because I discovered after the fact that a few of the new players mismarked their score sheets, and gave themselves 0 points for a tie, in another case 2 points for a tie, and in another case you forgot to mark the last game entirely. This is some phantom points floating around the data set, but not enough to be significant. So the data is rather enlightening as it gives us some solid numbers to base our handicapping system off of. We can basically conclude that in a 4-round match, if you are playing an opponent that's more than 2 standard deviations below you, you should be winning close to 100% of the time. Your score sheet should look like this. Now, since this was supposed to happen, at least statistically, neither you nor your opponent should be rewarded or punished for the result. So under my system, each of you would receive 4 league points. Now, if your opponent was between 2 and 1 standard deviations beneath you, the stats say your score sheet should look like this. If it ends up that way, again, you'd each receive 4 league points. If you're within 1 standard deviation of your opponent, there's no handicap. Your raw score is equal to your league score. If you're playing a stronger opponent who's more than 1 standard deviation above you, up to 2 standard deviations, statistically you should win 2 of the 8 points. Again, if that happens, you each get 4 points. If you're playing a very strong opponent who's more than 2 standard deviations above you, you're not expected to win at all. You get 4 points just for showing up. To demonstrate how this works in practice, let's look at Mark's score sheet. Mark finished with 41 points. His first opponent was Tony, who finished with 18. Tony is more than 2 standard deviations, or 18 points, below Mark. Statistically, Mark should sweep Tony. He should win all 8 points. What actually happened is Mark won 6 points to Tony's 2. What we do to adjust this for a league score, we take the 2 points that Mark didn't win that he was supposed to, and you take them away from the base of 4, which he should have won for sweeping. The 2 points that Tony won go on top of 4, which gives her 6 league points. His next 2 opponents, Alex and Jeff, also finished 2 standard deviations below him. Again, Mark should have swept both of them, but he didn't. So he was down 1 point to Alex, which goes off of his base of 4, so he only gets 3. Alex gets a bonus point of 5, because she took a point she wasn't supposed to. With Jeff, Mark won 6-2. Again, Mark fell short, so he loses those 2 points, and Jeff gains 2 points because he statistically overperformed. Mark's next 2 opponents, Robert and Kyle, finished more than 1 standard deviation below him, but less than 2. Statistically, Mark should win 6 points out of the 8. Well, with Robert, again, to Robert's everlasting shame, Robert got swept. So Mark, overperforming, gets the extra 2 points added to his base of 4. Robert, underperforming by 2 points, gets them subtracted from his base of 4. With Kyle, same thing. Statistically, the score should be 6-2. Mark got 7 points. Kyle only got 1, so the league score in this case would be 5 to Kyle's 3. Mark managed the same result against Marty in his last game, 7-1, but Marty finished 2 standard deviations below Mark. Marty managed to squeak in a tie for a point, so Marty gets rewarded with that point, so Marty would get 5 points. Mark would be punished. He only gets 3. Mark finished the round robin with a total of 41 points, easily winning the pool. However, if this were league play, he would receive 21 points. Now we'll take a quick peek at Kyle's scorecard. His first opponent was against Alex, who finished more than 1 standard deviation, but less than 2 standard deviations below him. Statistically, Kyle should win 6-2. That's exactly what happened. They both get 4 points. His next 4 opponents were within 1 standard deviation of himself, or within 9 points of himself. So that was even. And it's raw score, so he won. Well, first game was 4-4, 2-6, 6-2, 7-1. Raw score and league score are the same. Last game was against Mark. We already talked about that. He should have won 2 points to Mark's 6. He manages a tie. He only got 1 point. So 1 point comes off of 4, and Mark got the extra one, 3-5. Just so happens that Kyle's gross score and his league score ended up the same in this case. But again, it's more than Mark because Kyle statistically overperformed against his opponents while Mark statistically underperformed. I ran a conversion for each player and came up with the following results. Kyle would top this week's league board with 26 points, Robert 25, Tony 24, Jeff 24, Alex 23, Marty 23, and Mark 21. So what you see the system does, it requires the better players to perform to a very high skill level just to maintain their place in the league, similar to someone with an unusually high average in bowling, while keeping the lowered skill players in the fight and rewarding improvement. If you do the math, you'll notice Mark had a potential to win 28 points if he won every single point, while Alex, who's brand new to the game, she'd have potential to win 54 points if she won every point. Now, when it comes to applying this in a league, what you need to do, obviously, is first thing you do is run a round robin, preferably 3. If I had it my way, I would run it like our old bowling league, where the first 3 weeks we bowled for average. The first 3 weeks, the round robins would count for raw score only. There'd be no league points awarded. But you're going to need at least 1 round robin with no league score. Once you have your round robin, you need to calculate your standard deviation. Now, don't get excited. You don't have to go through this whole thing. This is a mess. There's an easy way to do this. You go to calculator.net. You put in your player's scores, you hit calculate, and it spits out a standard deviation. When I put this round robin through it, it came out to 8.76. I rounded up. In hindsight, I probably should have rounded down. Ended up including some people within a standard deviation of someone they weren't actually there. They were actually in a different bracket. So try to round down. After you have that number, you go player by player, determining which one of their opponents is in which scoring bracket. If we look at Kyle's, we see he has 4 opponents within 1 standard deviation to himself, or between 17 and 35 points. Mark is more than 1 standard deviation above him, but less than or equal to 2 standard deviations. And Alex, who finished with 13 points, is more than 1 standard deviation below Kyle, but less than 2. Once you've done this for each player, you can run your round robin again. Collect the score sheets at the end of the night and determine each player's league score. Then take each player's raw score and add it to their raw score from the previous week. You will use these accumulated raw scores to calculate a new standard deviation each week. This is important because throughout the course of the league, as people improve, they'll be moving up and down scoring brackets relative to their opponents. Integrating substitutes should also be straightforward. After the round robin, take the substitute's raw score and multiply it by the number of weeks your league has played. You can then go back and retroactively apply the appropriate league score for matches involving the substitute. So there you have it. That's my idea on how to get a equitable singles league going. Let me know what I overlooked, what I did wrong, what I did wrong with the math, or so on. I'm open to criticism here, so please comment. I want everybody's opinion. The floor is open for discussion. Thanks for listening, and have a good day.